Hey, hey, hey there, Facebook friends and family. It's Patricia here checking in as the 15-minute advocate. Hope your week is off to a great start. I have already been on the road and back today, but I did not want to miss out on kicking off this week in a good way by making sure I reached out on a couple of different forms and different ways, and definitely with the 15-minute advocate. So here we are. I'm going to jump right in. I am an active on a number of different sites, and particularly with all of the things going on politically, socially, just a lot of craziness going on in our world today. And I see a lot of people who have been, just jumped in, just, excited, worked up, however you want to describe it, but, engaged, which is great, right? Engaged in the process, engaged in discussions in ways that they haven't been before. But the one that stuck out for me is a post more recently in one of the groups where the person was reaching out to say, help. I am so overwhelmed by everything that's going on today, and I don't know what I should be doing. I'm getting tired, and just reaching out for help in that. So I decided then that I'm like, that is God interrupted my video. Okay, am I live here? I think. Sorry about that. I just had something interrupt me. I think it was my kids' school calling to tell them they have testing tomorrow. Yes, I know this. Okay, all right, where was I? The post from someone saying that they are overwhelmed by everything that's going on and getting fatigued and not sure what, they should be doing or how they should manage it. And so I decided that had to be something that I would speak to as part of the 15-minute advocate. So here goes. Overcoming overwhelm as an advocate, because when there's so much going on, it's so easy, right? Because you feel, especially if you're either new to the process or you're really feeling engaged at a level that you've never been before. Again, kudos, and that's all fantastic. And but it will be easy to get overwhelmed, especially because if you have a sense, as so many people do today, that, oh my God, this stuff is not letting up anytime soon. And, that's something we'll talk about for another time about pacing, but it's a little bit related. But we're going to focus on right now is how do you overcome that sense of overwhelm when you really do feel like you're doing everything you can, or, or you don't know what to do next. And so my first tip is you have to stop and breathe. Because I bet you in any case that if you take a moment and look up, there's a lot of anxiety that's building, and literally you probably haven't been breathing in some ways when it comes to whatever your issue is, right? And so I want you to stop and physically take a breath. Deep inhale, deep exhale, so that you can then try to figure out what to do next, right? So just stop and breathe. Take a breath. It may be that if you're actually engaged in whatever it is you're doing right now, that you need to step away from it. But take a breath, take a break, okay? And then, secondly, what I would suggest you do is once you've taken your breath, once you've taken your break, to kind of gather yourself and to step away from that anxiety and to step away from that sense of overwhelm for just a brief moment, okay? Is then secondly to think about, what is it I really care about? I mean, because there's something you really care about. That's why you have this anxiety. We don't get worked up over stuff we don't care about, right? So there's something that's triggering you and to cause you to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing enough, or there's too much I can't deal with, or what do I do next, okay? So figure out what that is. So that's the second step, is what is it that I care so much about that it is getting me all worked up? I'll use, for example, one thing that gets me, will never fail, that'll get me worked up if it involves my kids, right? If it involves something about my kids and their schooling, I'm very much mama bear. I'll get, from 0 to 100 absolutely very quickly. And so sometimes I do have to take a step back. I have to think about what the situation is. I'm like, okay, what is it that, I'm getting all worked up about? And most time it may be if I feel like maybe my child has not been treated properly, or that someone has misinterpreted or misapplied some information, and that's affecting my children negatively, whatever. Okay, so that's the thing. So once you've identified what it is that you care so much about, then the third thing you want to do is, I've taken a breath, I've taken a break. This is what I care so much about. Where is it in my level of priorities of addressing? Okay? And that's really, really important. It's like, what is the priority that I'm giving to this instance, to this issue? And where does it fall in the grand scheme of the things that I want to deal with every day? Okay? And that is important to note, because so often people will forget and get thrown off by their priorities. And so that anxiety just flows over to other things, right? Because let's say if they're really, they're staying up all hours of the night working on this issue, doing this volunteer work for something that, oh my goodness, I forgot to sign that paper for my kid, or I missed this deadline for something. So sometimes we need to be able to take a step back and be like, okay, wait, what's the priority here? And if your issue is a priority for you because you feel that strongly about it, that's great too. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be, but I'm saying once you recognize it, again, it's letting go of that anxiety that's associated with it, because you're like, I don't need to be worked up about what I'm, quote, missing, because this is something I really care about. I am willing to give the time and the focus that this needs and this requires, because that's how strongly I feel about it. Okay. So that helps to address some of the overwhelm. Now speaking of focus, that's the next thing. After you prioritize and think about where does this fall in my list of priorities, for me personally, the next thing is to focus. Because if it is an issue that does raise to the level of high priority for you, then that may mean that there are some other things that will have to go by the wayside. Other issues that you care about that you may not be able to address right now. Because most of the time, folks who get overwhelmed with something, either because they're trying to commit too many resources at one time to one thing, or they're committed to whatever it is they're dealing with, but there's so much more that they feel is being tossed their way and that it's being ignored, or that they're missing out. And here's the thing, and it's something I've learned greatly in some of my other business teachings, which is sometimes it is okay to let something pass by. It's hard, particularly for those of us who are overachievers. It is hard, but you have to know, in order to be able to pace yourself and to give yourself the level of commitment and energy that you need in order to achieve the goal that you want, which is, to help this organization, get X number of signatures, or to make so many number of calls, or to pull off this, this giant march, whatever the initiative is. Sometimes it requires you to say no to something else in order for you to be able to say yes in a big way to what it is you are working on. So don't be afraid to say no to the other things. And in context of all of the social and political issues, sometimes that just means turning off the news, turning off your Facebook, feed, limiting it, limiting your access to your email, whatever it is you need to do in order to be able to focus more on what you have already identified as your priority, means that you may have to actively shut out some other things. And that may include also telling somebody, you know what, I am really, trying to manage what is being fed into my head and my spirit these days. So I really can't talk about that issue with you right now. Now that may take some people aback, but think about how much respect you will get also, because you won't be wasting people's time trying to feed you a line or give you information or, give you all their stuff, dumping onto you their issues and concerns. It's one thing to also to listen actively and not to engage. So that can be another thing, is you can be supportive of other people and other things by listening, by passing that on. But long as it's not you taking on an ownership level of that issue, that concern, because that's when we do get overwhelmed, when we've taken on too much. So what did I say? First, you got to make sure you breathe, take a break. Number 2, you need to ask, what is it about this that makes me care so much, that I'm feeling this level of overwhelm. Number 3, once you do that, what's the priority of addressing this issue for you in your life in the grand scheme of things? And then once you prioritize, number 4 is to focus. Start zoning in on what it is you want to do, which means you have to say no to other things so that you can stay focused and so that you can manage the overwhelm. Don't be afraid to turn off the phone, to turn off the news, to turn off whatever it is you need to do in order to be more focused, to be more balanced, so that you don't get overwhelmed. And like I said, there were times especially during legislative session here in Texas, when I just refused to watch the news, because there were times in my career when I had been in the back room when an issue was being discussed, and that 30-second blip that would come across the news was not an accurate reflection of the discussion, and it would just drive me nuts. So we just kind of had this unwritten rule that during the session, I rarely watched the news at home, because I didn't want to get worked up over something that I knew wasn't necessarily accurate or completely reflective of what was going on. So, those are things you just have to do. And to do those actively. So those are my tips for addressing your overwhelm. And don't forget to give yourself a break. Now, I know I said I started with that, but I'm talking about, that first break was so you can gather yourself, so that you can kind of do some reflection about what it is you need to do, how important is this issue to you. But on the back end of that, going back to taking your break, is to come up and to step away so that you can get the energy and maintain the level of commitment that you want to, without getting burned out, without feeling overwhelmed. Because, sometimes you're dealing with something that's a marathon, not a sprint, and you need to conserve your energy. So every once in a while, you may have to step away and say, you know what, hey, I'm not going to be available for that, the stuffing of those envelopes today. I'll be back tomorrow. And maybe what you're going to go do is go watch a movie or go play football with your kid in the backyard. Whatever it is, do that thing that gives you a break, that gives you a mental break, gives you a physical break, so that you can be fresh for the next activity. All right? So that's it. So remember, to take a break, to step away and breathe. Number 2, ask yourself, do a little reflection, ask yourself the question of, why do I care about this issue so much? Number 3, once you've asked yourself that question, what is it in the level of priorities for the things that concern you the most in your life right now? Where does this issue, or helping out with this issue, where does it fall? And acting accordingly. And then number 4, allowing yourself to focus in on one issue, 2 things, or whatever it is, but knowing to actively disengage from others so that you don't get overwhelmed with trying to do too many things all at once. Okay? Remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And lastly, take a break. Give yourself